Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining me. If you are here on the replay and you have any questions, you can always find me on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram at CreativLEI. I'm always welcome to any questions that you have and further conversation. So join me on any of those platforms if you aren't catching me live here on Periscope. Welcome to all of you that are popping in live. You'll have to excuse me, I'm on the iPad today because my little one took my phone, and then, hi Michelle, and then she fell asleep, so I was all set to go with the phone, and then I switched to the iPad. So here I am. For those of you that are joining for the first time, my name is Lisa. I blog at CreativLEI.com, and it is looking at life creatively, and it's just a chronicle of our family, my life as an artist, and how we handle the everyday, the ups and the downs, the triumphs and the trials. Just kind of sharing a non-filtered view, because I am not a Pinterest perfect mommy. I do not try to be, and I do not ask you to be either. So my goal is to be real and authentic with you and sharing. If you see me in gray, I do not have the x-ray effect on. You may need to exit and come back in. So like I said, my goal is transparency and authenticity, and so this Periscope broadcast has been kind of in the making all throughout the summer. Thanks, Michelle, for giving her that tip. That's happened to me a few times too. Periscope is still a relatively new app, so it's still going through a lot of growing pains. Thank you so much for all of you that are in here. I am going to assume that most of you are very curious. What in the world is someone doing, choosing to put a foot in both worlds, both homeschooling and public schooling? Hi, Donna. Thanks for coming in. So I wanted to take this opportunity to kind of share where we're at as a household and how we've made this decision, kind of how we're moving forward and what it all means, because you don't normally hear from someone that's doing both. You will hear the very extremes on either side, and very little from those of us that choose to address both at the same time. That's exciting for me to hear. We have consulted. Hi, V3 Embry. I don't know your first name. I do like to try and learn them, and it's not in your profile either. Well, if you will share your first name with me. Hi. You did it with who came home after 1 year. Okay, so a little bit of backstory. For those of you who have never read my blog and probably don't know what our schooling history is, my oldest two children started off in public school. The schools where we live are relatively good. We had gotten good recommendations for the schools that we are zoned for, and so our oldest two children began their academic career in the public school here. And we had an interesting time. My oldest was, on the upper edge of the ages for going in. And so when he went in, he was very interested in the academics and not so much interested in the kindergarten. So we had some issues with following instructions when it came to coloring and doing the less academic things, but you know, it's part of the process of learning, is learning to follow all instructions and learning how to be a member of a classroom. And so we ran into a lot of those issues. And they knew from the first year, his kindergarten teacher addressed the fact that he was likely gifted in certain areas, but that in kindergarten there was nothing that they could do about that. They wouldn't pull for gifted until 3rd grade, so that we would just have to hang in there and use whatever resources were available in the classroom, which was kind of limited because it's just the one teacher and one assistant for 20 some odd children. But we made it through the year. The teacher was great. She really did try to communicate with us and do what we could. And then in 1st grade, he had an excellent teacher who recognized what his struggles were and really worked with him for that. But then in 2nd grade, we hit a brick wall. We had a teacher who was very inflexible. She did not really want to work with us. She wanted to point out all that was wrong. She wasn't seeking solutions with us, wasn't partnering with us. And by the end of that year, so he was finishing second grade, and then my second son was in kindergarten, and he was not really having problems, but not really excelling either. He was kind of a middle of the pack, hide between the cracks type of kid. So by the end of that year, both my husband and I looked at each other and we knew that it was time to pull them from that situation, that neither one of them were benefiting and that we needed to do something different. In college, my first year and a half, I was going to school for early childhood education, and the most impactful class that I had, although I walked away from that major and I went back to art, the most impactful class that I had was exceptional learning. And I spent classroom time in exceptional classrooms, both behavioral needs, academic needs, and then giftedness. And so that semester that I did the exceptional learning class, the idea of homeschooling first entered my mind. So I was a freshman or second semester freshman in college when suddenly I realized that the system didn't just have to be public school or private school, but that homeschooling was an option also. And so it's kind of always was in the back of my mind that the minute a school stopped working with us, that we did not have to submit to that system, that there was another alternative. And so that following fall, we began to homeschool. And so I started with a third grader, a first grader, and a kindergartner, and a preschooler and a toddler at home. And it went okay. It was a challenge. It wasn't easy. Bringing them home required a lot of deschooling for all of us. Since neither one of the boys had had really a stellar time and experience in school, it was very tricky. And I'd say that with kind of a word of caution for those that are transitioning from public school to homeschool, it's not an easy thing. It takes time, and it's not even just a matter of, oh, we'll take a week or a month of deschooling. Sometimes it takes a long time because you have to address some of the main struggles that were happening in the classroom or in the reasons why you brought them home. And so that first year was a lot about learning each other's rhythms. And it was difficult. So we started off, using classical education model and quickly realized that it wasn't for us. It was very overwhelming with the mixed ages and skill levels of our children. And so then the following year we prepared to use a set curriculum that was Charlotte Mason minded. So it was more of gentle learning and teaching them to learn, not necessarily teaching them what to learn, if that makes sense. And so we were all prepared, and we started that well. However, I was pregnant, and I had her at the end of September, but she ended up in critical condition and on life support and passed away within a month. And so our second year of homeschooling was like the ultimate roller coaster. Here we were set to begin a new routine, and everything went out the window. And much of our schooling for the fall semester really went on the back burner. And I will say that I'm very thankful that we were home because we needed that time together. We needed that time to heal and not be sending them to a school that might not understand the grieving process, sibling grief, and all of those different nuances. So it was good that we were home for that year. And so then the following year, we thought, okay, things will pick up. We'll find our new routine, and we're gonna get past this survival mode now, and we're gonna really thrive. But the truth is that we didn't. We continued to have some of the same patterns. We had, two older boys that really didn't enjoy school, and so, in a room with multiple ages, and by then we had another child in school. It was not the picture of the one-room schoolhouse that I think most of us see as, the ideal homeschool situation. It wasn't always like that. We had some really, really excellent days, but we had some really, really miserable days also. And so now this has gone on. We just completed our fifth year home, 6th year home. I think we completed our 5th and we're moving into our 6th. And over the past year, we started talking to the children about owning their education. Now that we had a middle schooler, we had a 5th grader, a 4th grader, a 2nd grader, and a kindergartner and a toddler. We started talking to them about owning their education and asking them what they needed to succeed. And our oldest son asked, he wanted to go back into school. He felt he needed a stronger structure, which me as an artist, that's kind of really hard to do. Like I can plan, but I'm so flexible that it just, we have this overall plan and goal, but not necessarily a, at this time, this, on this day, that. And so our personalities were very different there, and we needed to make a change there. So we spoke to him, and he wanted to go into public school, and he wanted to attend high school, but not necessarily right into high school. So this year, he's going into 8th. It seemed like a good time to transition, and so he's really excited about that. And then my now 1st grader and 3rd grader have also asked, because they've never been in the public school situation, they're so curious and they're excited, and that's not necessarily something that we're trying to keep them away from. I think it's very natural to want to experience what a classroom is like and what it's like being in a room. Hi, Grace. Yeah, it's going to give him some time to get acclimated to the school environment before hitting high school. So that was part of our reasoning for this year. And for the 1st grader and the 3rd grader, we want them to get that curiosity answered. They want to know what it's like to ride a bus. They want to know what it's like to go on a field trip with a classroom full of kids. And I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with that, but we are we're going into it with eyes wide open. We've been in the school system before. I'm a public school graduate, so is my husband, and we recognize that there are problems. There is, no schooling situation is perfect. The public school system's not perfect, private school system's not perfect, and nor is homeschooling. And so for us, here we go into this year where we will be experiencing both. 2 of our children, our 5th grader and our 6th grader, have asked to remain at home at least for this coming year. And so we're going to do that, which to both sides seems crazy. Like my homeschool friends are saying, I don't even know how you're considering that. I just can't even wrap my head around it. And then public schoolers are thinking like, well, why would you leave anybody home? Why wouldn't you just send them all? And this me-centered part of me is going, well, if I'm gonna send one, then I'll send them all. However, when we first made the decision to even entertain homeschooling, we made it with a promise to ourselves that we would pay attention to each year and each child and meet those specific needs, because that is the beauty of the homeschool choice, is being able to address each child as an individual and not just, a blanket statement or a blanket choice for all of them. And so this year, like, that's the needs are 3 of my children need the environment of a public school, and 2 of my children still need and want the environment at home. And so while it's not going to be easy and it's not necessarily my first choice, it's where we're going because we think that that's the Lord's will for our family right now. So any questions so far? Like, I have some points that I wanted to make because I know that there's just a general curiosity about especially our specific choice in this and how we feel about it. I know one question that many would ask is, why not private school? Why would we go from homeschool to public school? And I think that that's a good question. I don't necessarily see anything wrong with the private school situation. However, from our perspective, it's for us, as far as our faith view of it, even if we sent them to a private school, it's very unlikely that any religious school around here would meet our family's convictions and our doctrinal beliefs. And so whether we put them in public school or private school, we're still going to be dealing with differences of faith. And for us, it's easier to talk to our children the difference between biblical worldview and earthly worldview than it is to kind of caress the nuances of Christianity and different denominations and different faith convictions. So as far as that goes, that's where we stand on that. I would rather explain to them the difference between black and white than trying to explain to a first grader, a third grader, and eighth grader what those shades of gray are. So for right now, that's where we stand on that. Yeah, it doesn't always mean better. The same issues come up in public because the same thing. There are some people who send their children to private school thinking it is a cleaner environment, but there are some that are doing that just for what they think will be moral teaching, but it's not necessarily. It's an education system and it's someone else's rules. Anytime you put your children into a situation that's outside of your own home, you're following someone else's rules. And for us, it's easier to do the black and white than it is to do the gray in this season of life. And also because if I'm going to pay for their education, I feel like the more prudent thing for us to do as far as stewardship goes is to be putting that money towards their secondary education for those that are going into college or vocational training. We want to be able to support them there rather than investing all the money in the elementary and high school. And that's just where we stand. It's not right or wrong for us. It's not right or wrong for anybody else. It's where God's leading us right now. So let's see. Another question is, so are we putting them into public school because we've failed and we think that the school will do a better job? And my flat out answer is no. Have I failed in some areas? I absolutely have. My children's skill levels are asynchronous. However, I don't think that that would necessarily be better if they had been public schooled throughout, because we noticed that difference between our first two children who were in public school. My first child came home a reader in kindergarten. My second child did not. He was a late reader. He needed extra time, and we were able to provide that for him without him being behind a whole classroom full of children. And the same with math. You know, my children have excelled in some portions of math and taken longer to grasp concept of others. And so by being home, we've had a little bit more, we've been afforded more time to work on the areas that they need the extra help without keeping them completely behind. So it's not that I think that public school will do a better job or we will do a better job. I recognize that there are deficiencies in both areas and that it's going to take work for those that I'm putting into the school and those that I'm keeping home. There's not an easy job on either side. It's just not. We're trading challenges a bit. Because my public schoolers are still going to be bringing home homework. There's still going to be things that they don't complete on time. That's just the reality. It's the reality of their different personalities too, not necessarily where we choose to have them for their academic hours. Does anybody have any other questions, or have I hit the points that you were curious about? I'm really an open book on this because I don't want to hide the reality of it or make it seem like it's something it's not. I will say that I am looking forward to having just the two that want to be home, because sorry, I'm gonna mess with this for a minute. Sorry, she was sleeping on my lap and she woke up. I'm looking forward to having home just the ones that want to be here, and we'll be able to focus things a little bit differently, especially, since they are close in age and relatively close in skill levels, we'll be able to do things just a little bit differently without waiting for a whole household to catch up so that we can do things together. So there's just, that reality, and, having a little bit more flexibility and free time because I'll only be working with 2 students and not 5. Although my toddler will still be the wild card. Oh, thank you, Donna. Donna says, I think the way you guys process this and made this decision is good. A great example. But thank you. It's not, and it's, for us, even from the beginning, we've said it's not a one and done decision. If we start to notice things that are what we've already deemed as possible red flags, if we notice that they don't get any better, we will have to readjust. Whether that means at the end of the year or midterm, we shall see. We're taking it kind of one step at a time and going through one milestone at a time. Yeah, reassessing, I think, is the big thing, and it's something that we had promised ourselves in the beginning, but somewhere along the line we kind of got lost in the doing and stopped looking and seeking to make sure we were still on the right direction. So that was kind of the big thing this year, was coming to the realization that we had compromised a bit and we had given up some of the conviction that we started this journey with. And so that's when we knew it was time to make some changes and really look at each child individually and make that decision again with them, and not just kind of black and white. So if there are no other questions, I will probably wrap it up and attend to my needy little toddler. I really appreciate you guys being here. I appreciate the hearts and encouragement, and those of you that have been following our journey for quite a while understand that it wasn't an overnight decision. This is a very long thought and prayed choice for us. And though I will say that I am going to completely miss the 100% flexibility of homeschooling, we are looking forward to seeing what happens for the 3 too. Like, especially Evan, my oldest, going into middle school, going into 8th grade. It's really kind of exciting because he's at an age where it's time for him to test his foundation. And I didn't even make this point, but it's kind of a big thing for us. We started to realize, as far as public school versus homeschool, and where faith comes into the picture, I do not believe that my children are going into the public school as the salt and light, because they are still growing their own faith, and I don't expect them to be, public school missionaries. That was not our goal at all. However, I am looking forward to the opportunity to give the children the flexibility and the freedom to kind of explore their faith and shore up their faith footing and foundation while they're still living at home. Because I don't want to keep them sheltered completely until college, and then have them go off to or either be counting down the days until they can leave for college and get out from under our thumb, or go off to college, not say anything, and make mistakes that they feel like they can't bring back home. I want them to make those mistakes while they are still here and under the security of a household that is accepting them regardless of what decisions they make, poor or good. So getting to do that and stretch those legs while still having the comfort of home was a big factor for me, especially, for the older one, the 8th grader, and then going into high school. Thank you, Donna, for sharing. That was a big thing, because I remember I became a Christian in high school. I came to Christ at 16, and I still remember the first time I got to really kind of stretch out my personal convictions. I remember our English teacher, my junior year, assigning us to read Catcher in the Rye, which, if for anybody who's had to read it, there's language and vulgarity, and I could not read it. I read the first couple of pages and talked to the instructor and said, I can't read this. My personal conviction prevents me from reading this. Between the language and the themes, I don't feel comfortable completing this assignment. And he said, okay, that's fine. You can do an alternative assignment. And I'm thinking like, okay, great. I'll just do the same work, just a different book. But he said, well, you don't have to read The Catcher in the Rye, which is 100 some odd pages. You can read The Good Earth by Pearl Buck, which was hundreds and hundreds of pages. And so right there at the age of 16, I had a choice to make. I was going to either stand by my conviction and do the harder work, or I could compromise on my conviction, read the book that would be done quicker and easier, and that everybody else in the classroom was reading. But I didn't. I stuck by it. I said, if I've put myself out there and said that this is my conviction, then this is what I need to stand by. And I have to accept whatever's going to come as a result of that. And so I did it. But it was a lesson that I can still retell it because it stuck with me. And that I want my children to learn those things and experience those things before they leave our household. And so that's one of the reasons why putting them in public school doesn't scare me, because they still have the safety of our home to come home to in the evening. And you know, we can redeem hours. That's it. It's not that we're sending them off and we won't see them again forever and ever and ever. You know, it'll be harder to redeem those hours, but it's not impossible. And that will be our goal this year, is to find those ways that we can, in small ways, redeem the short amounts of times during the day that they are gone out of our household. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat now. If the broadcast has already ended, go ahead and send me a message on Twitter or through Facebook or Instagram, because I'm very happy to continue this conversation with you. If this is a decision that you're facing right now and wondering how to do it, oh, thank you. We are looking forward to the experience. It's going to be crazy, especially because our fall schedule is already insane with events and traveling and extracurriculars. So it's going to be an adventure. I'm looking at it like that, and I think that regardless of what happens from day to day, at the end of the year, we will all be better people because of it. It's going to be crazy, but it is going to be all good. I'm looking forward to that. So that's all I have for you. This will be written out in a blog post soon, because I know that there are still plenty of people who are not on Periscope, but who are following my journey on Instagram and Facebook and are very curious about our decision. And so hopefully I'll hammer that out a little bit more. If you have any other questions, I'd be glad to address them in that post. And thank you so much for joining. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for the encouragement of the hearts. I will